It's another episode of the Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll. I'm Ray Coob.
I'm Marcus Goldman.
And Marcus, you know what I realized, man? I was reading an article and it was talking about 30 years down the line, and you know, you don't expect the next thing you see to be the year 1991, which to me is prime territory as far as rock music for me and life and everything else. And 30 years later, all of a sudden it's 30 years? Whew.
And that music's being played on a classic rock station 30 years
right now,
later.
all across America.
It was a monumental year in music. We've had a podcast about the importance of 1971. We also have looked at, in our research, that 1981 was a huge year in music. And then here we are falling into 1991, 30 years later, and it was a powerful year for music as music was changing in the rock and roll world. We were going from the decadence and the complete insanity of the hair era to more of a quote-unquote grungy era, and the music really had a lot of power. It was also the year my father passed away from Lou Gehrig's disease.
Wow.
And so a lot of the music I listened to at that time period probably was tied to what I was going through at home. And it was still, and I look back at that time, even though it's a hard time, fondly because of the music. And I still listen to a lot of that music today, as I know you do from our many conversations and our many events that we've gone together over the last 15, 20 years. So, you know, we've seen all this and we've experienced all this later on, and you were doing this live with the Rocker Show as it was blowing up.
I was like in fuego. I was living the life in 1991. I was on the radio playing the music. I was living and writing about it at the Friday Morning Quarterback, and it was 110% of me. And the music that was coming out in 1991 from the beginning was strong, but would not portend for the end of 1991 and what would happen by the time we got to Christmas buying season.
The music that year was legendary.
So all this gets us around to thinking about that year, that maybe we should be doing an episode of 5 favorites. And I tell you, I thought about a bunch of different little chunks that we could have just done and done 2 or 3 different lists of 5 favorites within the whole year. And though we decided, no, let's just take our best shot at trying to figure out what our 5 favorites were from the whole year, all the music, because not only was hairband music happening and grunge on the rise, there were other bands, traditional artists that had already been established who were also making great music through this whole period and through 1991. Well, you know, Marcus, whenever I think about doing an episode of 5 favorites here on the Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll, sponsored by Crooked Eye Brewing, pouring the cure for what ails you since 2014, I always wonder what Vegas will give us for a line. And here we go to Vegas for what this episode's line will be.
Well, Vegas says that due to the fact that they've followed our podcast, they're taking a gamble on 2.5 as the over-under, due to the fact that they know our taste from around that time.
Wow, they're good, except for one thing.
What's that?
The fact that I may once again cause Vegas to tell us to go fuck ourselves over the bet. Now, they're going to take the bet, whatever we put in, they're going to take it. But that doesn't mean they're going to pay.
True.
Just so you know.
True.
Because we've encountered this before.
Yes,
so,
we have.
Knowing what you know in your personal mental computer, Vegas says 2.5. Marcus says 2.0, and I think Vegas is on to something, so I'm going to bet a 3 in common out of our 5 favorites on this episode of the podcast. And I think, honestly, Marcus, with that, you may have the best opportunity to score a win, which you haven't had in a while on an episode of 5 favorites, by the way.
I actually think you might win this one. I think you might be closer.
I'm looking at my
see.
stuff.
I'm looking at mine too, but we will see.
So what happened in 1991 was a lot And I think we probably should just jump in and start doing our 5 favorites, because I don't know about you, but I have a number of honorable mentions. And then there are so many records that were amazing. And I'm not even going to get to all the things that I liked, just the ones that really made a difference in my world in 1991 and then stayed with me.
I think that's a grand idea, because I actually have a huge list of honorable mentions. This was one of the most challenging 5 favorites to put together that we have done yet.
Agreed and agreed. All right, I'll jump in with my number 5.
All righty, Ray, what is your number 5?
It's an album from one of my all-time favorites, a person who I became personally connected to around this time. It also connected to him, the artist, to one of my favorites, Lemmy. Their songwriting together on the album No More Tears, released September 17th, just as the grunge explosion was about to go off, is my number 5, Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears.
I remember when that album came out, and I think at that point, I still liked Ozzy, but I wasn't as into Ozzy as Ozzy at that time, because my tastes were evolving, which you will see from my list as well as my honorable mentions. And no disrespect to Ozzy. Always loved Black Sabbath, always loved Ozzy, but I just don't think I was listening to Ozzy as much at that time period, because my tastes were changing.
I don't think you're alone, and I think that's why No More Tears became viewed as a big comeback album for him. Your number 5, Marquez?
My number 5, I saw this band open up for Dinosaur Jr. literally 2 weeks after my father passed away. I don't remember a lot of the details of the show. Their song had not blown up to change the world at this point. They were the opening band for Dinosaur Jr., and I'm talking about Nirvana and Nevermind. And while in radio we have played the daylights out of this album, it's still a great album up and down, and when it came out, it had a huge impact on me, and it made me look at music completely different. And seeing them live, I remember them being great. I don't remember a lot of details, but I don't remember a lot of details about those 3 or 4 weeks after my father passed anyways. So
I didn't know that you had gone to see Nirvana that close to your dad's passing, so I understand why it's a blur and why it could be cathartic as well. And also to see Dinosaur Jr. there too as well. Yeah. A great show. Sometimes music can help us to blow out those hard feelings and difficult feelings that are inside us because of something like losing a parent or other loved one. And your number 5, Nirvana, Nevermind, and you know somewhere that's going to figure in
Absolutely. I know that that's a one ding. I'm like, okay,
that's
one.
A one ding.
Because you mentioned Ozzy, and I'm like, okay, there's one that we're not going to have. But again, it's still a great album, and again, a lot of love for Ozzy, but yeah, we were changing at that time. Ready for my number 4, Ray?
I'm sitting here with bated breath, so let me take the worms out of my mouth, and you give us your number 4.
That same summer, Ian Astbury did a show called Gathering of the Tribes, which was the precursor to Lollapalooza in so many ways. And one of the bands that played that day took the stage with their crazy sound as I was peaking on mushrooms. The second to last time I did mushrooms. Full disclosure, full honesty. And I was so blown away by what I saw on that stage that I ended up listening to that album over and over and over for years. And to this day, my favorite live Primus song is those damn Blue Collar Tweakers, and I'm talking about Sailing the Seas of Cheese, Primus. That album is number 4 on my list.
It is an amazing album, and I looked at that and said, man, you played that a lot on your show, and you listened to it a lot at the time, but I couldn't get it onto my list, let alone make my top 5. You're number 4 from Primus. On this episode of The Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll, it's a 5 favorites thing.
Yep. Right now, we need to get to your number 4.
Well, it's easy for me. In a lot of ways, 1991 and 92 were all about the Pit, the Snake Pit, Metallica's Black Album. Saw them here, saw them at their 14 million selling platinum album award party in New York. Saw them in Pittsburgh in a night that will legendarily live in the minds of anyone who experienced it. And one of the great moments for me is at this place in New York. It's like a club. Everybody's there excited. The guys show up. and I actually bump in back to back with Hetfield. And he turns around and he goes, "Hey, I've been looking for you. It's good to see you came." You're like, holy shit, we're just radio guys, trade guys. But they were glad I was there. I mean, I knew Cliff and Peter as managers long before I knew Metallica and all that. But it just felt good to be there and be welcome. That makes that my number 4. The Night in Pittsburgh is an episode unto itself.
I definitely think we should do an episode on that at some point.
If you really want to get an insight to it, maybe we should have him and the other consort for that night, festivities. Rockstar Rob would be there, and so would Johnny D from Britney Fox. Ooh. It's a long story and a fun one. We don't have time for it here on this episode of 5 Favorites.
I'll tell you what, that Black Album's fantastic. I remember when it came out. I was a little later to the Metallica party. I heard And Justice in college in, I think, 88 when it came out, and I remember seeing the video for one and being blown away by it, going, oh my God, these guys are so good at what they do. And I like the Black Album and dig Metallica.
It's not even my favorite Metallica album.
No, but it's a great album.
Yeah.
In a great year of music.
In an amazing year of music, it stood up to everything. Absolutely. And kicked its ass.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's my number 4.
And
now, my number 3 doesn't fit into any of the stuff we've been talking about, except for one little tiny vein. Great artists delivering great albums in a year of musical change and challenge. And these guys continue to roll that they'd already been on with an album called Achtung Baby. I'm talking about U2, my number 3. On this episode of 5 Favorites, our favorite albums of 1991. Yes, it still gets heavy rotation here on the old pod thing I have over here in the corner.
Can't complain about that album. It's a great album, and it shows, even though they made change and they evolved as a band, they still put out a consistent, high-quality album, and they do that all the time. They have consistently
I think that they hold back
albums
until they're sure it's that good, and then they put something out. They won't put out, oh yeah, let's do that. Oh yeah, we didn't really like those 2 songs that much, but put them on anyway. It doesn't work that way for them, and that's how they keep going, I think.
I think you're right.
Before the mid-roll, we've got time for your number 3 on this episode of 5 Favorites, my friend.
All righty. My number 3 is, I'm bending the rules because these 2 albums are so closely tied.
You have no idea what you're in for.
But these 2 albums are very tied together as they're part of the year that was a big change for rock and roll. I remember hearing Alive and being just walloped by that opening riff and that song moving me to the core. And then within a few days, hearing Temple of the Dog's album. So I'm talking about Pearl Jam 10 and Temple of the Dog as my number 3 because of their close relation and because of their importance. Both of those albums were therapeutic and were definitely in high rotation because of their power and their rawness and their beauty. They're great
As
albums.
I look to my right and I see my double platinum for Pearl Jam 10, you know I understand completely.
Absolutely. And even songs that don't get played on the radio very much, like Reach Down.
Every song.
Every song on both of those albums is fantastic.
That's why I never play any of the normal hit songs in the middle of the night. I'm playing Porch or
Pushing Forward Back.
Why Go? I got my list. Listen,
yes.
I got a list. So I understand your number 3 there because it's just one of the most amazing debut albums of our times. It really is. Temple of the Dog, which actually came out in April, was already on my radar as well. And because of the nature of it, because of my interest in the Stardog champion, Captain High Tops himself, Andrew Wood, who had passed away, I was tuned into that. And off the launch of Pearl Jam and the success of Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog would take on a whole new life into 92 because of that. So that's your number 3. And technically, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at Nirvana and Primus and Pearl Jam and Temple of the Dog, and I'm looking at Ozzy and Metallica and U2. So technically, at this point, at the mid-roll, we have 0 in common, my friend. 0, which is what I was secretly afraid of, that we're really going to have none in common. But that's kind of where we are right now as we head to the mid-roll. Let's roll out and pick up the growler, will you? We can bring one back, and let's go have a pint at Crooked Eye in Hatboro. Summertime and a great pint go together like water, yeast, and hops. And what a better place to go to get the pint that you want than Crooked Eye Brewery right there at York and Montgomery in the heart of Hatboro.
If I'm not mistaken, with Pennsylvania's restrictions easing, there is live music and some other great events going on at Crooked Eye. So not only do you get that pint, but you get to have a good time with your friends as well.
They are fully open, and I went in to see the Crooked Eye Band, the full Crooked Eye Band, back together for the first time in over a year. And what a great time when they're in on second Saturdays. And you can get great music at Killer Crooked Eye near you at Jamie's House of Music in Lansdowne now. Stop on by, see live music, and have a pint of your favorites from Crooked Eye at Jamie's House of Music.
Right in the heart of Delco.
And there's something else happening at the brewery, Marcus. They are now serving spirits. Pennsylvania craft spirits now available along with your finest brews and all the other goodies they have at Crooked Eye and Hatboro. I just think it helps everybody to have what they want, and that's part of having a good time when you go in both at the Hatboro Brewery location and at Jamie's House of Music. So wine and cocktails there as well. It's all part of the fun at Crooked Eye. Check them out at crookedeyebrewery.com. The best way to keep up with what's going on at both locations is on Facebook, though.
They do a great job keeping us informed of what's happening at Crooked Eye or Jamie's House of Music on Facebook.
For and the cure for what ails you since 2014. Check them out. Crooked Eye Brewery in the heart of Hatboro.
And in the heart of Delco.
From Disney.
A lot of people want to know about my family. Well, we have a magical house and magic gifts.
What's your gift?
Mirabel didn't get one.
This Thanksgiving.
Casita.
The family is in danger.
I'm losing my gift.
It's all gonna come down to you.
I can do this. And at least I'll have a friend. Nope, he flew away immediately. Quitter!
Disney's Encanto. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Only in theaters Thanksgiving.
Back for the second half of Five Favorites. 5 favorite albums of 1991. Marcus, this has not been easy. And so far, the score is 0 in common. Marcus starts out with Nirvana's Nevermind, and then sails into the seas of cheese with Primus at number 4. His number 3 is a cheater. It's Pearl Jam 10 and Temple of the Dog, and I'm going to let you get away with it easily because you know how much I love both those records.
Yeah. And we had your number 5, which was Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears.
No More Tears.
And that beautiful composition that he co-wrote with Lemmy Kilmister, a masterpiece as far as ballads go. Your number 4, the Metallica Black Album, and it includes a story from Pittsburgh that we will get into at a later date when we talk about Metallica. And then number 3, the ever-evolving U2 and Achtung Baby.
Achtung Baby.
Pick yourselves up and Sally fuck! Sally fuck! Sally forth.
All right, plowing forth on this episode, you got to tell us about your number 2 favorite album of 1991.
I'm going to preface this by saying you are absolutely not going to be expecting this.
All righty then.
It was the first album of a pop artist who got play on alternative radio. He eventually married Heidi Klum. His debut album is absolutely wonderful, and it was one of the albums that really helped me during my roughest times, and that is Seal's debut album, Seal. I mean, seriously, that album is wonderful with songs like Crazy and Jade, and it's just beautiful, and one of those albums that I still listen to. My wife and I got to see Seal about a decade ago, and it was wonderful. So there's my shocker at number 2 with Seal and his debut
Not a
album.
shocker at all, because if you were an adult of a present mind in 1991, that album touched you in some way, and I listened to it all the time, and it could have been in my top 5. I'll just say that. And it was part of the soundtrack the day my son Eric was born. So it's always connected for me to that. So whenever I play it here off the podcaster here in the kitchen, I think of him and that day.
Of course. What a great memory to share with that album. Alrighty, so now it means that you have to go to your number 2, Mr. Ray.
My number 2 is part of your number 3. Pearl Jam's 10 hit me like a sledgehammer, and I'd already been hit by Peter Gabriel's sledgehammer. Here's the thing. I get the first single, and nobody's going to play it in Philadelphia. There was nobody that was going to play that song that time because the way things were with radio just wasn't there yet. First chance I got, I played it on Rockers. Reaction. Played it again, reaction. And eventually I got other songs. And every song that I played that had some hair on its nads, big reaction. So by the time they get around to release date on August 27th, I knew it was going to be a big reaction. And Philadelphia was one of those markets that stepped up right away and said, yeah, we like these guys. They had played Dobbs, and for some God unknown reason to this day, I didn't get to go that. I think there was something else going on with an artist that was already out or something that I had to be at. Because that's how it worked in MMR and Friday Morning Quarterback world in those days. So I didn't go to Dobbs that night. And that's one of the few things I missed that I wish I'd been at. But I've seen them many times and continue to love going to see Pearl Jam. But that first album, every song, there's a couple that were too soft for rockers, but most of them weren't. And before everybody cut the curse words out of everything, we would let fun fly at all hours on the Rockers Show with Pearl Jam's 10. My number 2.
That's an excellent number 2, and it's an album that will always hold deep to me, so it is my number 3. So there's our 1. I don't think we're going to do it, dude. I really don't think we're going to do it.
What is your number 1, my friend? This is the moment of truth.
It is the moment of truth. It is an album I've raved about for years. It's an album that I feel is the best album of this band from Seattle. I always like to call this album Raw Power because I think it is the best way to signify this album. Johnny Cash covered Rusty Cage, but the way Chris Cornell sings on this album, the way Kim Thayil plays, the way Ben and Matt Cameron just wail on this album, it is special. And there are songs that don't get played on the radio, like Searching with My Good Eye Closed, Drawing Flies, Holy Water, Somewhere, Room 1,000 Years Wide, which is my absolute favorite song on the album.
Say it, brother, say it!
I'm talking about Bad Motorfinger and Soundgarden, and when I first started working in rock radio, I always called them Big Fat Soundgarden on the air. They had a huge sound, and of the Seattle bands, they are still my favorite of all the Seattle bands to this day, and Bad Motorfinger, I think, is just a raw power masterpiece.
Looking to my right and seeing the gold award for Bad Motorfinger, I concur, my imbalanced brother.
Well, we need to know your number 1, and it looks like neither of us are going to be correct with the Vegas odds from what I presume.
So, what happened in 1991 was September 24th, a day of change and explosion in American music and rock, especially. All these albums were released on September 24th, 1991. Status Quo's Rock Till You Drop, Prom, Prove You Wrong, The Cult, Ceremony, Nirvana, Nevermind, Bad Motorfinger from Soundgarden, which was highly anticipated, and Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. All out September 24th, 1991. Now, I am not going to try to make all of them my number 1 on this episode of 5 Favorites, but I cannot, in good conscience, not make a 3-play and call for Nevermind, Bad Motorfinger, and Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic as my number 1 out of 1991.
We pulled the 3. You won.
And I can make my case. First off, the baby hangs in the living room. People from Geffen thought it would sell a couple 100,000. I told them if it didn't sell 2 million, I'd be quitting the business. When Baby showed up, it was 4 million. God knows how many it's gone on to sell. The Landmark album, released the same day as Bad Motorfinger, which took Soundgarden to a whole nother level. And all those songs you mentioned when you were talking about it being your number 1, they are ingrained in my DNA. At a time in my life when I probably should have been, quote unquote, done discovering new music, I was being encoded loaded with these albums. And Blood Sugar Sex Magic was another one. I love that they did, at that time, an edited version, a bleeped version of the album so people could play whatever they want. I have it somewhere.
I have the bleep version somewhere as well.
Oh, good. Hold on to that.
I will.
And because CDs are coming back. That's the new trend. CDs are coming back. But those three albums together were a large part of my listening, even though the albums didn't come out until late in the year, and they continued to be into 92 with 3 and 4 and on. So that's why they are collectively my number one, and I got to add it up. And I think when you put...
We're three.
Have Nirvana in common from yours and Pearl Jam in common from both of ours.
And so
we didn't have Seal and Soundgarden, so it's actually 3, and holy cow.
You won.
I win again on another episode of 5 Favorites here on the podcast.
That's crazy. Blood Sugar Sex Magic made my honorable mention, and I love that album dearly. It's a great album, and some of the deep cuts like Sir Psycho Sexy, My Lovely Man, Naked in the Rain are some of the wonderful tracks on that album that don't get radio play. And they actually took Pearl Jam and the Pumpkins with them on the Blood Sugar Sex Magic tour later that year.
I saw all those bands all around that same time. And for the first time together and separately and individually at Lollapalooza up in Montage and all this stuff. It was a crazy fun year, 91, 92, because the fallout from all this stuff coming out in 91 was 1992. And it really was a wonderful time to be immersed in music. I'll just say that.
Absolutely. And that was, a fun tour. And because of that, we haven't even gotten into the honorable mentions yet, which that list is going to be absolutely insane.
I got a 6, 7, 8. Yeah. It's like a chorus line. A 5, 6, 7, 8. 6 for me was Temple of the Dog, and I said before when you were talking about it, why? My love of Mother Love Bone and Andrew Wood got me in the clue there. And other than when they did their brief tour, the only other time they performed as Temple of the Dog was at a Concrete Foundations convention back when that was released, and I think it was 91, and I think that was the year I saw them there in a hotel ballroom with about 400 other people. It was
That's
cool.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Guns N' Roses did this little thing called Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, and that came out in September and set off an immediate explosion for them, reestablishing them with so many great songs between the two volumes. That has to be my number 6, 7, 8. And number 8 is an album I still listen to all the time, Diamonds and Pearls from Prince. It's just a sexy motherfucker
It's
album.
a great album. That made my honorable mention. I didn't have a 6, 7, 8. I just started listing the ones that were close to being into my top 5, like The Sky is Crying from Stevie Ray Vaughan, which is a magical album. Monster Magnet did Spine of God that year.
Yes, they
which
did.
I'm sure you were playing a little bit of that stuff on Rock. Yep. On the alternative end, while a lot of the bands like Yaz were breaking up, you had Alison Moyet release her single album Hoodoo, which was getting a lot of play on alternative radio, and that album's fantastic. The Hoodoo Gurus, an Australian alternative power pop band, released the Kinky record, which I got to see them, I think, either in 91 or 92 for the third time, and they were great. Like you mentioned, The Cult's Ceremony, an important album and a great album. Lenny Kravitz released Mama Said. Roll the Bones from Rush we haven't even talked about, which is a fantastic record.
It really is, and it was the first time that they really did like the full-blown animation on tour. An incredible album and tour that I got to experience when I was working at MMR.
Also, from Novelty Records, there was a guy who I saw on MTV called MC 900 Foot Jesus, he had a song called Welcome to My Dream, and the song was If I Only Had a Brain. And while it's not great, it was just fun, goofy.
Wait a minute,
novelty
it's a favorite.
music.
That's why you're talking about it. So you don't have to justify that to anybody.
But also, like Attack of the Killer Bees from Anthrax came out that year.
It did.
Infectious Grooves, which is a Suicidal Tendencies, Michael Muir's side project. The plague that makes your booty move is the Infectious Grooves.
Dude, these are all albums that I love very much, but they didn't get into my real honorable mentions because some of the albums that did have such strong reasons. Like REM's Out of Time, it was the AOR album of the year. It had all kinds of great airplay stuff on it, but yet it was still one of my favorites because it got played a lot. Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend, heavy rotation for 2 years back in like 91 and 92 and 93 for me.
Luck of the draw.
I'll put it on every now and then. The gold record finally came and caught up from Skid Row because they put out Slave to the Grind, which we are, by the way, slaves to the grinding
totally
of beans and the making of the coffee. Skid Row, Slave Slave to the Grind. I have that hanging up in the house somewhere too, as is my gold record for Typo Negatives, Slow, Deep, and Hard.
That's a great
album.
album.
Rockers heaven with that album, man. They were exactly what I was looking for as a host and as a participant in what was going on with rockers in Philly then. And I know you're a big Typo fan too, and you had a great interview with Peter.
Oh, yeah, I had a fun interview with Peter. That dude was an amazing human being, and the world could use people like Peter in this world, I'm telling you, man. The world needs people like Peter.
Lurking, lurch-like guys who are kind as fuck.
Yep, he had a great heart.
Speaking of fuck, the album from Van Halen's, the album Front and Awful Carnal Knowledge,
came out that year.
That was part of my 1991, and again, I'm sorry I was wrong. I just want to say it once again, but that was in there.
Luck of the Draw. Go ahead,
I wasn't even thinking of that one. Sure, that was a great album. She got on a roll there in the 90-91 range and really put herself into big-time airplay and sales and stuff again. It's funny because she went to Capitol and Warner's just missed it. The other thing I wanted to mention was something that was more about what stoner metal was. You mentioned Windorf and Monster Magnet, but just before Nirvana, there was already stuff going on that was in that vein. Caius and their debut album, Wretch, came out and was a big part of our show and our culture. Night at Dobbs with them early on, long before Queens of the Stone Age and all that stuff was really cool. You mentioned Seal, and I concur. Totally unique album in a time of change. The Smashing Pumpkins, the Gish album, they were the real Smashing Pumpkins. I was re-listening to Gish this week as we got ready for this podcast, and I was just like, yeah, man, the balls on this stuff.
Dude, Rhinoceros is such a great song.
Oh, the whole first 3-4 songs all in a row.
I
got
agree.
more?
No,
Okay. An album that surprised me when I went back to listen in the last week as we got ready, because I needed to, was Sepultura's Arise. I played it a lot on rockers. I was a little resistant to the heaviness in it at first, and now I listen to it and it feels mainstream to me because so much about rock radio and active rock radio in the States has gotten more heavy, so that Sepultura, a lot of the stuff on that Arise album actually feels like it could fit. Queen's Innuendo came out in 91. It was their last album with Fred, and because it came out, I got to meet Brian. There's pictures. I'll post them. Meeting Brian May at my job at FMQB, and he brought us a present, which is pretty cool. I'll see if I can dig that out. It's a paper promo cube of the Innuendo album artwork signed by all four.
Whoa.
I know, I'm getting excited thinking about it. Also in the party pile of 1991, there's a lot of records that I won't even admit, but I will tell you that Jesus Jones's Doubt album was perhaps the, not number one, but certainly a top 5 party album of the year with that song Right Here, Right Now, and so many other great songs that I was having a mental flashback on. I'd set the controls to the time machine a little more currently, not 1958 like we did on the Beach Boys episode, and found myself in an apartment on South Street going, wow, this looks familiar. And I want to include mention of Motorhead's 1916. Not only are there great songs on that album, it's also the first time I met Lemmy, and later having a chance to work with Lemmy became one of those great things in my rock and roll story. So there's some my extensive, very extensive honorable mentions, etc.
Some incredible albums. That just the honorable mentions alone show you how phenomenal 1991 was as far as music goes. And for some strange reason, the years on the ones seem to be very productive as far as producing good quality music. I don't know what it is. Bringing in a new decade.
I don't know, yeah.
It's just one of those wacky things that works. And we were lucky in 1991 where we were in our lives to be able to have all of this music to choose from to listen to. That
is absolutely the truth. When you look at the list together with all the stuff we didn't mention and all the stuff that's on our extensive honorable mentions, it's like, yeah, it was a fucking party, man.
We left so many good records off of this list that we didn't even mention that deserve to be in the honorable mention
Debut
list.
from Cypress Hill is a perfect example. It's one of my favorite albums, but
Green
in
Day,
1991, it was behind some of these things.
Yep, and then you also had, what was it, Public Enemy's Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Back, another phenomenal record. So there's so many great records we left off the list, and we're sorry. But we also want to know what your 5 favorite records are from 1991, so please share them with us.
You do that by sending us an email at imbalancehistory@gmail.com. A lot of people are sending us emails, and that's cool. Or if you just feel like making a comment on Facebook or on Twitter or things like that, you can follow us there. And on Instagram, you can just put in imbalancehistory.com and go find that too. Make sure you bookmark that and stay in touch there as well. There's all kinds of ways to reach out and touch us, Marcus. It's a strange little world we're living in this podcast universe on Dark Media. Hey, pretty soon we might actually be doing this podcast in person together instead of on Zoom.
That would be so nice.
It would, because I like sitting
so
across from you and,
Me too.
Well, we're vaccinated, so we're almost there.
We are almost there. So, yes, soon, hopefully this summer, we'll be recording in person.
That's his prediction. Vegas says, yeah, we'll see, mister.
We'll see how that early summer hit goes.
Until the next episode of 5 Favorites or whatever the hell else we come up with to do on this podcast, we'll sign off by wishing you all the best as you make your way through this final stage or stages, hopefully, of the pandemic. And thanks for hanging with us and listening so much and telling a friend, because apparently that's working, Marcus. People are telling friends about our podcast. So we keep showing up in different places. Thank you very much. Time to go. I'm Ray Coob.
I'm Marcus Goldman.
And this has been The Imbalanced History
of Rock and Roll.
I'm Stephanie Myers.
And I'm Stephanie Benya.
This is Stephanie and Stephanie Talk Tunes. We're excited that you're here to join us on our storytelling journey where we talk about music that is featured prominently throughout the course of our 20-year friendship.
It's our soundtrack and probably yours too. From hair metal to new wave to even classic country, we have stories to tell. These are the songs you want to forget but love to remember. Join us as we talk about the music that shaped our lives, including the music videos we watched a million times on MTV, BET, and VH1.
Every other Wednesday, we'll be bringing you our stories, memories, and fun facts related to songs and artists. Be sure to check out our episode archive where we've discussed artists ranging from David Bowie and Tom Petty to Willie Nelson and Kool and the Gang. You don't want to miss out.
Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Overcast, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And guess what? We're now a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Be sure to follow us on the socials. That's Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Stephanie's Talk Tunes, and on Twitter at Stephanie's Talk. That is Stephanie's plural, Stephanie's Talk Tunes.
So come one, come all. There's no VIP passes required.
All music junkies admitted.